Today we have a crazy revenge story on someone's boss. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, twin sister saved me from a car accident and has always made me feel guilty about it. Patricia and I, Felicia, are what you would call two identical twins. My parents always boasted about us anytime we were out from way back as little kids. It could be after church service, during family gathering, or at a restaurant when people complimented us based on how identical we looked. I couldn't blame them for wanting to show off their beautiful twins. After all, they waited for 10 years before finally having us. So to my parents, we weren't just miracle babies sent to them as a blessing, we were also privileged to be born, and they never took us for granted. They must have had these ideas that we were fragile little kids never to be taken for granted, so they showered us with so much love. I cannot remember when my twin sister and I weren't given whatever we wanted. It could be a toy, a cloth, an accessory, a stationery, or even junk. My parents would go out of their way to make us happy, and whatever I wanted, my twin sister also demanded for it. It was handed to us without complaints or hesitation, so this made us quite spoiled as kids. For people who were basically given everything they wanted at their disposal, you would expect us to be chubby, or one of us a little fatter than the other, but it wasn't our case. My twin sister and I looked similar from head to toe. It was sometimes annoying how even my parents mistook Patricia for me, and Patricia was so good at disguising as me. We were both known as the inseparable twins at school, and people hated our guts, which I didn't know until later. I mean, we both had each other, and didn't see the need to make friends until an incident occurred that changed things. 3 years ago, Patricia and I were on our way back from school. Usually our mom comes to pick us up, but we lied about having an extra class to attend and finding our way home ourselves, and told our mom not to bother herself. This was just an excuse to go see our favorite band play in the city. It wasn't like my mom would have had anything against us going if we had told her in advance, but we just wanted to be rebellious for some reason. We got to our destination and the place was packed as usual, so it was easy to get free booze. We had initially planned to stay for an hour, but an hour turned into 2, and before we knew it, we were late. Patricia and I were screwed, so we hastily packed our bags and left the party. It was hard to find a cab, so we stood by the sidewalk of the road hoping to find some sort of free ride. Patricia must have seen the incoming vehicle approaching us because she pushed me off course and got hit by the vehicle in my place. The car owner rushed my twin sister to the hospital where I called my parents, letting them know what happened. I felt so guilty about the whole incident, I stayed every day at the hospital in hopes of my sister waking up and refusing to return back to school while she was in a coma. I was so devastated that my mom insisted that going to school would make things better. She was wrong. I got to school only to realize just how codependent I was on my sister. I had no friends who could lend me their notes so I could catch up on what I'd missed. My homeroom teacher tried her best to make me feel included, but I could tell my classmates didn't feel the same way. To them, I was the self-absorbed twin sister who didn't give a rat's butt about anyone but herself. It took me a while to get off my high horse and become more relatable to my classmates, which was how I realized just how horrible I'd been towards people without knowing. The manner and tone my twin sister and I spoke to people like they were lesser than us, and so many hurtful things we said. Basically, we bullied people with our words. I got to meet my two best friends, Asher and Mindy. They must have noticed how miserable I was sitting all alone during lunch breaks or during class intervals. I was able to get along with them, and Mindy got me a job at the store she worked just to take my mind off my twin sister situation. She said if I was busy, I would have less time feeling sad all the time, and she was right. I would always work for a few hours and go to see my sister at the hospital before heading home with my parents and repeating the whole process. About 6 months later, my sister woke up from her coma and I was so happy. I couldn't hide my excitement. She seemed a bit different, mainly sad, but I tried to reassure her things would work out fine. She started her physical therapy, and about 6 months later, she was up and ready to go back to her normal life. I tried to make my sister feel included when she got back to school. Though she was still using crutches then, she was bitter than normal. At first, I thought it was just her being upset over losing a year of her life trying to save me, and how she felt different around her mates with her crutches, which made me feel so guilty. I tried to make her feel included by introducing her to my friends, but it was hard since I was a senior while she was still a sophomore. She treated people who tried to welcome her back with disdain, and those who gave her gifts she threw in the trash. Everyone stopped warming up to her and just left her. I could also tell she was being a massive witch to my friends who were nothing but polite and friendly towards her. I tried to reason with her, but to her, I had changed. I told her change was normal in humans and can sometimes be a good thing. But to her, I had changed for the worse. I blamed her attitude on her accident and hoped she outgrew it, but things got worse. Suddenly, she wants things I own. And while I was always glad to give Patricia whatever she needed, I hated how authoritative she got when I said no to requests that were beyond me and made me feel guilty for the accident which she took my place for. About a month later, Patricia was set to walk on her own without any aid. I thought this would make her feel better, but no, she was the same. Patricia not only had this attitude towards me, but also towards our parents. I once spoke to them about her bitter attitude towards anyone. They said they noticed, but it was a phase. She was still trying to adjust to the aftermath of the incident, and I should give her the time and space to do that. This just made me more determined to make my twin sister feel less alone, and I tried my best to include her in all the fun activities my friends and I had planned for the holidays. But it was a big mistake. Mindy and her got into a huge fight after Patricia made a passive comment about Mindy going back to India and how she didn't deserve to be in a country such as ours. It was such a disaster Mindy didn't show up for the rest of the activities, no matter how much I pleaded on Patricia's behalf. By now, I was getting irritated and tired of Patricia's attitude towards everyone. I decided it was time to stage an intervention and have my parents talk to her, which we all did, and this led to an emotional day where she claimed to be feeling different and envious of the life I had while she was in a coma. I told her I was doing my best to include her in my life, but she was ruining it by her attitude towards everyone. We had a heart-to-heart talk, and she promised to do better, starting with trying to apologize to Mindy for the hurtful statement she said to her. My homeroom teacher had a long talk with me about my plans after high school and the college I wanted to go to, and advised I spoke to my parents about it. I brought up the matter that night during dinner, but as soon as I made the statement about college, I saw Patricia's face turn sour. I felt guilty for not considering how she must feel having to listen to me go to college while she just became a senior. My parents and I spoke, and they pleaded with me to wait for my sister for a year so we can both make college plans together. It was very hard for me because my friends and I had a plan, but it was my sister who almost gave her life for me, so I decided to drop the college idea for now. I focused more on the store work since I had nothing to do after graduating from high school, while my sister had a YouTube account where she basically recorded days in her life and posted it. We were back to our usual self. I spoke to her about my concerns at work while she also spoke to me. I thought we were in a good place, so I spoke to her about the guy I liked and how he worked at a different section and how I was too shy to say hi. She basically encouraged me to go for it with a smile, and I did. We went out for a couple of times and I liked his vibe. I would come back from my date to spill the beans to my twin sister, who would eagerly listen to me and be happy for me, and I thought all was good. I was going through my sister's drawer to get a particular dress she borrowed from me when I saw a text message popped on her phone. I took a quick glance to see the familiar person she was talking to, and it was the guy I was seeing. She created a fake account and pretended to be someone else and was trying to get the guy I was dating. The situation was confusing to me because she had her own boyfriend and never once said anything about being interested in him. I went downstairs to confront my twin sister about it, and all she could say was she wanted him. When I asked her why, she said she just did. I accused her of being a sneaky thief, and she accused me of ruining her life, basically throwing it to my face as she always did that she saved my life and I owed her for it. As if it wasn't enough that I decided to wait a year so we could go to college together. She had to steal my boyfriend while she had hers. And she said the most unbelievable thing, that she planned to focus on her YouTube after high school and wasn't planning on going to college. So I was just wasting my time by staying at home on her behalf. I was so mad at her at that moment, I took out my phone and placed it on the kitchen stand and made a video of her saying such hurtful things as I confronted her in front of my parents and posted it on her page for all her followers to see what a lying witch she was. She got such terrible backlash from her followers, she had to delete her account, and I felt so satisfied seeing her as miserable as she made me feel. My parents decided it was time she went to therapy after hearing what she had done. And I recently got admission to college. Sometimes I always feel like I went too far with what I did, but a part of me knew she deserved what she got for being mean to me. I'm willing to bet that they weren't necessarily too big on YouTube at that point, If anything, OP may have just saved their twin sister from spending way too much time just trying to flounder on a YouTube channel. I'm not saying they couldn't have made it, but planning on hard launching a career where you just talk about your daily life on YouTube, it's not exactly a surefire model that's just going to work out if you keep at it. Really, like just about any kind of personal YouTube channel you launch, you kind of have to love to do what you're doing and not necessarily angling it as, oh, instead of college, I'm just gonna do this for a career. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, I caught my friends secretly saying mean things about me. I caught my friends secretly saying mean things about me and plotted my revenge against them. There is nothing worse than finding out those you actually care about were making fun of you behind your back and never actually cared about you as much as you did care for them. I, 23-year-old female, should know better at this age that women can be mean. After all, I'm a woman and I've seen and experienced all sorts of insulting behavior ever since I was a kid. I should have learned my lesson, but I had to experience being betrayed by friends to know better. Ever since I was a little child, I didn't know what made me so different from others. Maybe it was my nerdy glasses or my crooked legs, which eventually straightened by 3rd grade, but I was mostly made fun of by my classmates for having these qualities. I always cried home and told my mom how much I hated school. She always gave me the assurance that it would get better in high school. Little kids are dumb, she would say while patting my hair. You are a smart girl. Focus on your books and do not pay attention to whatever they say. And I did believe her because she was right about one thing. I was smart. Way smarter than my peers from such a young age. In high school, I focused more on my books and less on friendship. I would find an empty, quiet place to sit during my lunch break and read. I found that I thrived better at reading in silence and knew the best corners for that. It could be my empty class, beneath the sport field seats, or an empty restroom. This was how I realized just how fickle people were. I was always in a closed corner, making it easier to eavesdrop on girls who had no idea I was seated where I was, speaking so badly about their so-called friends based on petty jealousy. That was when I decided that I wasn't missing much, just basic high school drama. I got so good in class I started representing my school in competitions, and I loved it. I loved being in charge on my own, at my own terms, and speaking at debates with such vigor and boldness, contrary to how I acted around my mates in school. It was thrilling, I wouldn't lie. I represented my high school for an interstate competition and a debate, which I won, and this definitely made me quite popular, and this was how I met my first friend Alex. I believed Alex and I understood each other on a different level than others. We were both smarter than a normal typical teenage girl who was looking to be accepted by a crew or by a boy or people in general. Alex was a student of the opposing school I had won. She was the speaker for the opposing party and she was good. Almost had me by a few points. I highly respected her because she didn't make a big deal out of the loss. Rather, she came up to me after the debate was over and congratulated me. This was the beginning of a long-term friendship which stayed that way despite the distance of my school to hers. We would meet up at weekends to talk about some of our ideas revolving around the law and its sometimes absurdity, absolutely boring stuff that a normal teenager wouldn't find interesting, and we walked along the park. It was fun. I absolutely loved it. We both knew we wanted to study law. Alex wanted to be a prosecutor, while I wanted to be a litigator. We kept this close relationship going till we got to college, which we both decided on based on a game. Alex wanted to go to Minnesota, while I wanted to go to Vermont. We were both on the fence on which to pick, that we decided to play 50 question based on the law. It was fun and I eventually won, making Vermont our final choice. Alex wasn't a pushover or anything like that. She just was cool about most things, and when she wasn't in favor of something, you would definitely know. For us, getting into our desired law school was easy. The hard part was socializing. It was easy to ignore my peers in high school. Most of them didn't care anyways, but here it was different. We had to share dorms with people who may or may not like us. Anna, my roommate, was from a long line of lawyers. I knew from the moment I saw her, she was just in law school out of obligation to her family, while Sheila was Alex's roommate who was still having a hard time deciding whether or not she actually wanted to be a lawyer. Anna and Sheila were cool. We all stuck to each other and became friends. Despite Anna's rich background, she never showed off or made us feel inferior in any way. There was no pressure or oppression from any party. For some reason, my parents thought it was time to become independent and asked me to get a job. I did that and it messed with my schedule a lot. I barely had time for myself and time to study. I tried to explain to them that I still needed their support, but in their defense, Alex also worked, so I needed to find a way around it. Alex worked at an ice cream store in the mall which hardly had any customers, but the owner could care less. He just paid them for their services despite their attempts. The staffs all tried to make things better, but he was just adamant about how he wanted things done a certain way, which made them eventually give up, while I worked at a clothing store in the same mall which was always packed with kids. The owner always needed my attention, she needed effectiveness, which I promised to be when I desperately needed the job, without realizing what that meant. I was always complaining to Anna about how stressful and demanding my work was, but I never expected to come up with the idea that I tutored her for cash. She needed the extra hand and I needed the money. I agreed without hesitation and went straight for it. I should have known it was a bad idea, but against better judgment, I went for it. The first 2 months, Anna wasn't doing any better. It made me question what I was doing wrong. I made notepads on topics to take and extensively went through it the day before. It was good practice for me as a tutor and a student, but it was all in vain. Anna wasn't getting better, and for some reason it made me feel lesser than I usually felt. I would sometimes have no choice but to help out Anna with some of her projects or assignments. This went on for a while. Anna eventually stopped paying me to tutor her, but rather to help her out with her work. I admit part of me knew what I was doing was wrong and I shouldn't have continued, but the money was needed and I liked that her grades improved. This went on for a while till I eventually told Alex about it, and she told me what a bad idea that was, and how disastrous I was being not just to Anna but myself. I was enabling her lack of enthusiasm towards law school, and I knew it was wrong no matter how much she paid. So I went ahead and told Anna I was done with our little agreement, and if she wanted me to tutor her, I would gladly do it for free. Anna was mad. I could see she was trying so hard not to make a big deal out of it, but there was tension. The next day, I went to the mall to ask for my job back, which unfortunately wasn't available. But as I passed by the ice cream store, I noticed they were in need of an assistant, and I applied. It turns out Alex quit working there the day before. I told them I needed to confirm if everything was okay on Alex's side, which they agreed to. When I went to meet Alex to ask about why she quit her job, she said she didn't need it anymore and she had seen a better job. I asked her what it was, and she said she was going to be working as an assistant for one of our professors. I was so happy for her. I hugged and celebrated with her. I also asked if she was cool with me working at the ice cream store, and she said yes. Later that night, I got back to my dorm to see Anna's mood was back to normal. She didn't seem angry about anything, and we were back to our usual selves, and I thought she must have been over the whole matter. I worked at the ice cream store from 6 to 10 and came back to crash in the dorm. It wasn't until one of those days where I felt sick and lightheaded and was asked to take the day off. This was the day I overheard my friends mocking me, precisely Anna and Alex. I was at the door, about to open it, when I heard my name being called. Alex said something about how I controlled everything to my advantage during our high school together. She claimed I had forced her to attend the same uni as I was because I was so insecure while she wanted to go to Minnesota. Anna had her own to also say about how I claimed to be perfect, but at the first sight of money, I dropped all my morals. Sheila was also in the room making fun of me as Alex helped Anna with all her work. As soon as they all saw me opening the door, they were back to their pretentious acts, which just irked me more. I pretended not to have heard their earlier conversation, while Alex pretended like she was waiting for me, but I knew she was helping out Alex with her work. Just how dumb did they think I was? While they went out to get dinner, all I could do was cry. I was so hurt by what Alex said, mainly because it meant she must have thought of me that way even when we were in high school. 5 years of friendship only to find out I had been deceiving myself. I cried myself to sleep and woke up feeling so dizzy and horrible. It didn't help that I was feeling sick. I had to go to the school clinic where I got the chance to just not be in the same room with my roommate because I just couldn't handle seeing her pretend like she cared. They all came over to visit and said some many encouraging words, but all I could feel was anger and resentment. I was done with them and I knew just how to get back at them. While I was admitted at the clinic, it occurred to me that Sheila was also doing so well for someone who could care less about law school, and then I put 2 and 2 together, and it became clear that Alex wasn't just helping out Anna with her work in exchange for money, she also did the same thing for Sheila. This was when I began plotting my revenge. I wrote an anonymous letter to the school dean letting him know what was going on amongst my friends, and wrote the specific time that Alex was always at our room helping Anna out with her work. They got caught, and they were all suspended for a year. Anna had it bad because her parents were lawyers, so they were so upset with her. I'd been discharged from the hospital and was feeling better when her parents came over to pack her things. Anna never suspected a thing, but Alex knew better. After all, she was smarter. When she came to confront me about it, I didn't bother denying it. She tried to plead for forgiveness, saying she never meant what she said and it was just her indulging Anna, but I was over her excuse. I never would have done what she did, and deep down, some part of her actually felt that way, which just made it worse. You know, it's kind of sad, but I actually could believe that Alex was just indulging Anna. You know, one of those situations where you're just hanging out with people and you kind of just want to be a part of the crowd. So even if you don't necessarily believe in exactly what you're saying, you kind of match their energy. I can't actually recall any specific time I've actually done this personally where I'm acting or saying things that normally I would never do so just because that's the vibe and energy of the group. But I would say it wouldn't surprise me if I was in some kind of group scenario and I just wanted to fit in, and I did feel compelled to act that way. That said, I wouldn't do it at the expense of tarnishing my 5-year friendship. It definitely tells you all you need to know about your supposed friend. Our next story is the experience I had with my first boss. I got my first real paycheck at 18, and this story is about the boss who gave me that check. I don't know how he did it, but I remember having a lump in my chest for some time after quitting working for him. He was my mom's college friend. I remember going to a grocery store with my mom when we ran into him. He looked big, really big. At least that was what my mom said when she saw him again after 14 years. My mom couldn't hide all the gasps and the shocks. I didn't quite get why she did all the drama, but I managed to give a quirky laugh. I looked away while my mom and Mr. R, whose name I later learned was his, caught up with each other. Before he noticed that I was there, it took about 5 to 10 minutes. It's not like I cared so much about his attention and all, but I think I liked it when someone noticed that I was in the room. When he turned his gaze towards me, he was surprised to see that someone like me had been standing by. In his words, "Who is this calm human with you, Jay?" The word calm made me blush sheepishly. In a jiffy, my mom introduced me as her heartbeat, as she fondly described me to strangers. He let out a warm handshake towards me, and I received it as warmly as he gave it. That was the handshake that led to a series of discussions between Mr. R and my mom, and eventually led me to work for him as a front desk officer. I got to work with him on his insistence because I had a few months before I resumed college. He had moved back to Los Angeles from New York to start his own business, and I could tell from his excitement that he was up to something huge. Although my mom didn't appreciate the idea of having me work with him in the beginning, I didn't quite understand why, but when she told me about how much and how long Mr. R chased her when they were in college, I was almost tempted to reconsider my decision to work with him. He didn't want to take no for an answer, no matter how many times my mom told him so. When they both finished college and moved to another city, he finally had to let go. Even though I knew my mother was right, I still left a little space for the benefit of the doubt. I did that because I knew that my mom could be overprotective. I remember how she tried so much to shield me from a lot of things because she felt she was trying to prevent me from getting hurt. In that process, I'd been deprived of life-changing opportunities in the past. I can't seem to forget how I let go of an international modeling gig because my mom couldn't trust the recruiter. That was why I didn't listen when she told me she had reservations regarding my willingness to work for Mr. R. I resumed work at Mr. R's oil and gas firm, and I was particularly at peace with my decision because I was going to pursue an interest in a field of interest. Everything seemed fine for the first 3 months. And I must confess, Mr. R was the most thoughtful boss to me then. Apart from being the face of the brand, Mr. R made sure he took me to the places that mattered. We went to meetings, and I was shown the city. Everything seemed too good to be true, to be honest. That thought made me remember what I felt when I met Mr. R. To me, he came across as unfriendly and someone who would be too strict. However, everything I experienced was far from such. He took his role as a father figure so seriously that I would often chuckle whenever I heard him say, "I'm like your father, you have to understand that." Unfortunately, all of that was short-lived when he asked me to join him on a trip that was scheduled for a business summit. Mr. R demanded something I couldn't imagine myself doing at the time. He told me to fly with him to another state for a business summit. He told me I had nothing to worry about because he would make sure I was well taken care of, and besides, he said he felt a level of responsibility towards me, so he was going to ensure my safety no matter what. I didn't know why I didn't appreciate the idea, even though I knew I would learn a lot from the summit. My mom was surprised that I exhibited such a level of restraint. I'd always come across as fearless. So when I showed fear, I knew my mom was wondering where that came from. I didn't honor Mr. R's invitation to the summit mainly because I knew I wasn't the right person to be with him on that trip, and for some weird reasons, I didn't feel safe. The last sane relationship I had with Mr. R was before he made that trip. Everything went so sour and stale between us when he returned that I was tempted to question if he had any ulterior motives. For the record, I was employed as a front desk officer in his firm, but I was made to carry out the role of an executive assistant. Although I knew I enjoyed lots of privileges because of Mr. R's relationship with my mom, I still felt it was only fair if he carried other people along too. Just like that, our relationship went from beautiful to sore in every way. I was tempted to ask if he didn't tell me to choose between traveling with him to the summit or staying back. Why did my choice upset him so much if he truly wanted me to make a choice? He was embittered towards me and he made sure he didn't hide it. I can't forget how he embarrassed me in front of a guest one day. He came in with the guest as usual. I stood up to welcome them warmly. While the guest answered warmly, Mr. R walked past me sharply as if I didn't exist at the desk at all. I knew the guest must have wondered if everything was right with him. Another time, he told me I was a good-for-nothing, ungrateful child who he was trying to help, but instead refused to be helped. I didn't quite agree with his stance because, as much as he was trying to help me gain hands-on experience as a young champ, I was equally offering services to him, and I was bringing my best foot forward while I was at it. His words got into me deeply. I felt pain like I'd never felt before, and it was at that point that I knew my mother was right all along. She was right in trying to restrict me from her friend. She must have known better after all. Even though he was a good man, he had this unique skill of manipulating people and wanting to make people worship him because he was kind to them. I remember my mom's encounter with him way back that made her stand her ground not to date him no matter what. According to her story, she said Mr. R had helped her out when she couldn't meet up with some of her college dues. In return, he had demanded that they visit his family home together for Christmas, even though he knew my mom came from a closely knit family that had the tradition of spending Christmas together. He ranted and made my mom feel that she was ungrateful, especially when she couldn't return favors. My mom knew he couldn't have changed much, so she tried to stop me from seeing his company as a gold mine for me. Because of my initial refusal to see reason with my mom, I didn't find it easy to go back to her when Mr. R was treating me badly. Besides, I'd made up my mind to quit the job, but first, I had to deal with him. I had a burning desire to put him in his place, both for me and for my mom. So I played along while I watched him violate our terms of contract at different times. One of the instances I can recollect vividly was when he tried to put a major blame on me even when the blame was on someone else. I remember how he gave me a task he knew I wouldn't be able to handle because of my experience and my job description. I did the job to the best of my ability, but it turned out that his executive assistant, who was meant to vet the job, didn't bother to. I'm trying to think that it wasn't a conspiracy because I knew this person didn't like it when I got attention. She was a major bone in my neck when Mr. R took me everywhere and gave me the most attention. I knew how much she tried to get me frustrated and make me feel undeserving of any favors from the boss. When she had the opportunity to make me feel incompetent, I knew she must have felt that she had hit the jackpot. The consequences of her actions cost Mr. R a huge contract worth millions of dollars. That was when someone needed to be blamed, and that person was me. As Mr. R walked into the reception, I could see anger and contempt written all over him. He walked briskly, as usual, this time towards me. I could sense that it was a matter of urgency for him. I could guess from his demeanor that he wanted to verbally abuse me again. I saw it in his gait, and I was so certain that I would hold nothing back. I had planned to walk away from his drama a long time ago, but I wanted to leave him with unpleasant words and memories that would make him puke each time he remembered. I wanted to be the bitter pill that he couldn't swallow so badly that I knew my moment had come. As he opened the door with all that urgency he came with, I knew he wouldn't care about my greetings. Straight up, he asked me if it was so difficult to get anything right with my life. He told me I was good for nothing and that I wasn't meant for high-profile places like his firm. He was walking away as usual because he expected nothing from me. No, he was wrong at that time because he would not make me feel that bad yet again. I told him he was the most embittered man that I ever encountered, and it wasn't because I was young and had yet to experience a lot of people. I told him he wasn't mentally stable enough to employ anyone because it was obvious that he had too many regrets eating him up. Mr. R, I advise that you get a therapist and do that before this bitterness consumes you. I felt I needed to give him that advice before I walked away, boldly and gallantly. As I walked away, I could feel two things behind me: his eyes and the shock that engulfed his throat. I could tell he was too shocked to have an 18-year-old erode his dignity, even if it was for a split second. As I walked home, I smiled to myself, knowing fully well that I'd been able to stand up for myself, and I was sure I always would. I'd like to have heard what Opie's mom said after all of this went down, though. I mean, I'm just wondering if they were mature about it or if they just had this big, "I told you so" kind of moment. I mean, I think if your mom said, "Listen, I knew this guy back in college, don't go near him," it's probably very valid no matter how buttery sweet this guy seems. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.